And welcome to Untethered with Jen Liss, the podcast that's here to help you break free, be you, and unleash your inner brilliance. I'm your host, Jen, and in this episode, we're going to talk about unshaming spirituality. Let's dive in. Hi there, friend. It's Jen. Welcome back to the podcast. It's a really exciting time. I set some intentions for myself at the very end of last year of 2022, and so many of them are coming to fruition in the most beautiful ways. I'm heading out to go and be able to offer breath work at a beautiful retreat in Philadelphia later tonight, actually, after recording this episode. And then I'll be doing another retreat in Santa Barbara in a couple of weeks. And I've got family that is coming to town to come visit from Wichita, Kansas, out here to Portland, which was another one of my intentions, and just some beautiful things that are manifesting. And it's so exciting. It's just so exciting when we put those intentions out there into the universe, and then we get to watch them show up in these magical ways, in ways that we never could have dreamed that they come in for us. And like just sitting back and getting to be the witness to the cool things that are happening in our lives is just spectacular. And I wish that for everyone. And really, you're listening to this podcast because you're one of the people who is seeing perhaps opportunities for you to do that for yourself. Maybe you're actively doing it for yourself now. And I just have to tell you that magic is real. When you set the intention, it really does happen. When we clear a path, that's what I feel like breathwork is so freaking magical for. It clears the path. It's like clearing out all the muck, clearing out all of the junk, just blasting it out of there so that we can intentionally bring in the things that we really do want to occur. Those visceral sensations that we want to have in our body, we can rememorize them. It's just, oh, it's so good. It's so good. My Brilliant Breathwork membership is launching. If you want to get on the wait list, I'm sending an email out here in a couple of days that is going to give a pretty cool founders discount to anybody who joins right away. So if you're interested in my Brilliant Breathwork membership, make sure that you go to jenliss.com/brilliant and get on that wait list. I've got it ready to go. I'm so ready to usher people into it. It's absolutely beautiful. And I can't wait to welcome you into a session. One of the really cool things that has happened for me, that maybe in all aspects I have along the way, I haven't felt like it has been so cool, is my own personal return to spirituality and really understanding what spirituality means to me, what feels good in my body, what really deeply resonates with me personally. And it's been such a journey. And I'm going to share some of that journey with you today because perhaps it could be relatable to other people. And the conversation that I had on Tuesday with Allison Holly, she's a channel. Like she is like full on spiritual. This is what she does. She's not only a channeler, she teaches other people how to channel, whether you believe in what she feels like is true for her or not. This is what she does, and she helps people and she helps herself. And it's just beautiful work because it feels so alive and aligned for her. And one of the things that has occurred for me over the past couple of years, especially as I've met just such cool, awesome people who are doing really interesting things in the world that me of a decade ago would have been like, that's freaking weird. No way. I don't even want to like talk about or talk to that person. You know, that transformation for me of just being like, wow, that's really cool. That's just really cool that this feels amazing and aligned for you. What I've realized so much of that is the unshaming that has happened around all of these practices. I mean, shame is one of the biggest tethers. And shame it's a very intentional tether. Shame. It has been created to keep us within a certain parameter, right? It keeps us in a box. Because if you go outside of the box, you're going to be shamed. It's incredibly powerful. In fact, when we went and toured the penitentiary in Philadelphia, when we were up in Philly with my nephew this summer, West Penn, East Penn, the biggest penitentiary, the very first one that was built on the East Coast, huge. So many big, cons have lived in that, lived like they lived there. They have been in that penitentiary. What they said is that was a new model for how to control, people who are going out of line, was putting people in prison. Prior to that style of imprisonment, shame was the most common way to keep people in line. We've used shame forever in order to keep people in line. And that's understandable. And it's like, yes, it can be right and good. It's like how we learn right from wrong. Like, I understand it, but it goes too far in so many instances to where it keeps us disempowered. Shame it's disempowering. The whole purpose of it, right, is to disempower people in many instances. And so it's so interesting with spirituality. So we could talk about shame as like a big blanket statement, and I'm not an expert on this, but I do think that all of us could become more aware, just broad stroke. How is shame impacting my life and perhaps keeping me from stepping into my greater power? Perhaps keeping me from knowing myself. It's one of the things that it also does. It keeps you from really knowing who the heck you are, because you're abiding by all of the rules that you have learned. And if you don't abide by those rules, you feel like something is wrong with you. So therefore, you never know yourself. It's a big thing, right? So broad stroke, something to consider for yourself. Today, we're going to specifically talk about spirituality, because that's what Allison does. And it's been part of my journey the past few years of untethering all of the shame that I have around this subject. I mean, I said this in that episode with Allison, in that conversation with her, but I was so triggered by the word God a few years ago that when I went to read The Artist's Way, and when I went to read Gay Hendricks' The Big Leap, both of those books, and even my own Kathy Heller, who is one of my greatest mentors, she's a Jewish woman, and she speaks a lot about God. When I would hear that word, it's like a visceral cringing within my body, just rejection of that word. Because in my life, I was raised Catholic, and I, was very steeped in Catholicism. And I definitely wanted to be the good Catholic girl up until my mid-20s, when all of a sudden I started to feel like I was like, I'm doing this for all the wrong reasons, was the realization that I had. Was like, because there are things about this that actually don't align with me. And I started to feel this huge rub for me. And it was shameful. I felt shame around not feeling right about the things that I knew I should feel right about, because I was raised to feel right about those things. And there was something that was wrong. And the way that I slowly over time dealt with that was by just simply rejecting it. Over time, I came to a point where I just completely rejected religion and had certain beliefs about it. And then over the past, a little less than a decade, it's been slowly coming back. And I've been coming back home to, what does spirituality mean to me? And I was rejecting that at first too. It just kept coming back and swinging back. And I'm like, why is this woman? Why am I so attracted to this mentor who is so religious when I'm just so triggered by anything religion? And I just kept coming back home to it. And so there was the shame around feeling like I'm not living up to the expectations of my lineage, of my heritage, of what my mom And my grandma, like all of her friends were priests. Like my aunt's a nun, like Catholic, Catholic, Catholic. And I just always wanted to be the good Catholic. I just wanted to be that. So then when I started to experience the shame around realizing that that wasn't me, and then it's like as spirituality started to come back, I started to feel like shameful that I had rejected it. And now, as I have come back to it in the past couple of years, then I was feeling shame from my friends who aren't religious because this is not what they believe, because I have a large group of friends who aren't. And for a few years, I 100% was on that exact same page spiritually, but I've shifted again back to what it really, really means to me. And so there was like this wave of shame that I was feeling with all of these situations. And there's so much tied up in religion, and we have so many views, and there's just through millennia of just this like butting heads over what is right and what is true. And what I think is so beautiful about the community and the circle, and really where I have found a home for myself, really that home is in me. And the group of people my spiritual friends, we're all on that same page. Like, it's just what it means to me. It's just what feels right and true in my body. And there is no shame there. There is no shame. There is no shame, and there is all empowerment. So much power and beauty and love and goodness and magic and all the unicorn horns happening in that space of what feels spiritual to me? What feels like love to me? I personally, what feels right now to me, what feels true is that we are all part of one something. We are all some extension of the one energetically. I feel like there is something that we cannot explain, that I don't know exactly what it is. There is something inside of me that is witnessing my mind, that is witnessing this conversation, that is within me and witnessing. And I don't know what that is, but it's like some kind of really cool, juicy energy that maybe it's a soul. It's what we call that, but it is the witness. So that's where I'm at. And that's what feels just like so awesome for me. And I feel it's like for the very first time, I can feel into this. I can feel into myself completely without shame. And I think some of the practices that people like Allison do, and I've had somebody else on the podcast who they really talk a lot about pleasure. They talk about ecstasy. They talk about desire, all of these really taboo things that we just for so long haven't talked about, that have had just been tethered in shame, completely wrapped up. We feel like it's not something that we're able to talk about. And if we do talk about it, we're a bad person. If we think about it, we're a bad person. It can only be talked about, thought about, experienced in certain environments. The untethering of that and having women and men and people in general who are willing to begin to talk about that openly. First of all, it takes a boatload of courage. And I think it's helping so many humans to unshame and to really come home to what feels right and true and great to us. And I personally don't care what anyone believes, as long as they're not actively hurting other people. But there are so many situations in which that those beliefs and that the shame that's wrapped up in it is hurting people, because I was hurt by that entire wave, right? Like it's painful to have to ride that wave. And if we could all be where I feel like I am now, I'm like, oh, it's like this huge, I was carrying this backpack that was just full of rocks. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I can put this backpack down. Why didn't somebody tell me so long ago that I could put this backpack down? But we're all carrying it around because it's societal. And I was telling my coaching cohort about this perspective that I had heard the other day from Emily Fletcher. She's another podcaster. She has a podcast that I just recently found out about, which is a really cool concept, very similar to what we do in this podcast in some ways. It's called Why Isn't Everybody Doing This? And she interviews really interesting people who are doing some wild and she herself does some pretty wild and interesting stuff and has lots of ideas. But what she was saying is that we have so much power. And when we remove the shame, when we release the shame and realize that we do have so much power, like that is really scary to our current systems. It's really scary. So all of this like tethering that we feel is really intentional, because if we all of a sudden just untethered, every single human on this planet just completely untethered from all things, right? It would be absolute chaos. And yet we can look around ourselves and see that some of that chaos is starting, that some of that chaos is happening, that something like this podcast where I'm openly talking about this, something like Emily's podcast where she's openly talking about this, the more we are able to have a voice in this conversation and start to really come home to what is true to me, these systems are dismantling faster and faster and faster. And what I think is so important is that each of us sees that we can be playing a role in crafting the new systems, because as those dismantle, we need new ones to be built, and we can let more crap like what we've been living in be built, or we can be the active builders. Those of us with open hearts, those of us who see a better future, who have a vision. You've had that vision calling on your heart for a reason. You see things potentially being a different way for yourself, for your children, for your grandchildren, for the world. You see that because you are one of the people who is meant to bring that into a reality. And you get to decide whether you say yes or no. You can take a back seat and you can watch what happens. You can be a bystander, or you can hop in and help build something new. And I don't say that to put any pressure on or to scare anybody, but it is a reality that I do feel like is happening. Things are shifting, things are changing right now pretty darn fast. We're living in a time where we're seeing a lot of things change. We have access to anybody in this world in a second. We can access one another. Oh, why not use that for good? Why not use that to understand each other on a deeper level? Why not use our curiosity instead of our judgment to see one another, to see how we are truly one? We all come from the same crap. We all come from the same space crap. I say space magic, space stardust most of the time. Today I called it crap, but it's like, it's the same stuff. We're all made of the same stuff. And yet, we have these inherent beliefs about some being better than others, and it's okay. That's also an unshaming that we get to do, is like, it's okay that we have those inherent, like sometimes we feel like we might be better than others simply because we've been raised in a society where we feel like our country is the best. And if we ignore that and we don't admit that, then that becomes a problem. But it actually is true, right? Like in the US, that I'm going down a rabbit hole, but you see my point. Like, we actually feel shame about that, but we don't acknowledge the shame. We don't acknowledge that, we might be elevated in a different position than other humans on the planet. And by ignoring it, it actually it makes it worse. So it's just simply seeing one another for what we are. I think it's so powerful. And that's actually a spiritual practice. That is a spiritual practice, just seeing another human and being willing to witness them as another human being. It's really, really beautiful, but we can't witness other people unless we witness ourselves. And there's so many mechanisms that get in the way very intentionally that have stopped you from witnessing yourself. But you have the tools at your disposal to be a witness. Breath work, meditation, walks out in nature, doing what Rob Walker said on the podcast last week, and practicing your art of noticing, dipping into your creativity, cultivating a loving sense of curiosity, noticing where you're being judgy. All of these things, in my eyes, are spiritual practices. It's helping you come closer and closer home to yourself. But it's taken me all of this work and all of this unshaming to even be willing to say that that's a spiritual practice, because I didn't understand what spirituality meant to me. It was so layered and continues to be layered. I'm sure I'll continue to peel away, little bits of this onion. But I call for you today to step back and really look at, where could I know myself at a deeper level? Where could I, without judgment and with more curiosity, simply see myself? Maybe even simply see others, and start to reduce the pyramid. Like, we have this pyramid of we think that somebody, like our boss, we see the boss at the top of the pyramid, right? And I think right now we're being called to reduce the pyramid a bit and see one another more eye to eye. And what can happen when we start to do that, when we start to simply see each other as part of the whole, as part of the same. We can see ourselves moving mountains. We can really see our power when we do that, because it's like, oh, I'm just as empowered as that person is. And we can start to witness that for ourselves. And then we start to see the power in other people too. And I just think that is such a beautiful thing. And the more we can do that, absolutely the better. So I invite you to open up your sense of curiosity. Tell that little judge in your head, if you want to give your judge a name. Christy Mandor, who came on the podcast a few weeks ago, she names the various personalities within herself, within her clients. If you want to give your judge a funny name, maybe Judge Judy, whatever you want to call the judge, and just witness that judge and witness where that judge might be wanting to bring shame into your life. And there's so much in spirituality, is one of those areas where there can be so much that it can feel kind of hard to start there. And yet it's one of the biggies. So what I would recommend is start small, start with one little thing, one little noticing, start practicing that art of noticing on yourself. And it will lead to one thing after another, and see the untethering that begins to happen with you as you open up to that curiosity and lessen the voice of that judge. In today's short breath practice, I'm going to invite you to witness the judge that might be popping up in your mind, and to offer it some love, because truly these pieces and parts of ourselves that are pointing things out or wanting to shame, they're really simply trying to protect us and trying to keep us safe. So I'm going to invite you to send a little bit of love to that Judge Judy inside of you and offer it exactly what it needs. So sitting back in a chair. If you're driving, please come back to this later, or do it with your eyes open, making sure to maintain strong awareness of your surroundings. Taking a deep breath into your nose, exhaling out through the mouth. Taking another deep inhale, filling the belly. Nice expansive inhale. Exhaling out through the mouth. And just continuing to rotate that breath into the nose, out through the mouth. Seeing if you can feel into the surface beneath your feet. into the seat beneath you and how that seat is supporting your body. Continuing to breathe into the nose, out through the mouth. Remembering a time when you might have felt a little bit judged, maybe a little moment of feeling like you'd done something wrong. And noticing that feeling in your body, continuing to breathe. There you go. Letting yourself feel it. And noticing those sensations and how you are witnessing that sensation in your body. Now moving your awareness to your heart space. And on each inhale, expanding and opening that heart space. Each inhale, opening the heart, tapping into that loving heart space, that boundless energy that exists within your heart. Calling those sensations that you felt around that moment and meeting them with that loving heart energy. Offering that loving heart energy to those other sensations. And just letting that love meet them. There you go. Just continuing to breathe into the nose, nice open heart. Out through the mouth, sending love. Beautiful. Noticing how both of these sensations can exist in your body at the same time. Just as you breathe, being witness to that. Beautiful. Breathing one last time into that beautiful heart energy. And on your exhale, feeling back into that seat beneath you, the floor beneath your feet, reminding yourself of that support. Placing a hand on your heart and just telling all pieces and parts of yourself, thank you. Thank you for showing you the way to safety. Thank you for their protection. Thank you for their love. And when you're ready, moving that awareness into your fingertips, into your toes, giving them a wiggle. Just coming back into the here and the now. Recognizing how you can tap into these sensations, how love can meet all of your other sensations and offer them exactly what they're asking for. Those pieces and parts of ourselves that want to offer us safety are really truly seeking love, and you can offer that love anytime straight from the source of your heart out to those pieces of parts. Opening up your eyes when you're ready. Just coming back into the present fully. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope that it opened your heart, opened your mind and your curiosity to something new. Made you maybe desire to examine something in a new way, see something in a new and more beautiful and open light. It really, truly means the world to me that you would listen to this podcast. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them to me. I am Untethered Jen on Instagram. You can also send me an email anytime to hello@jenless.com. Another beautiful thing that you can do for me is to share this episode with a friend who might need it or who might benefit from it in some way or might want to listen and spark their own curiosity. Thanks again so much for listening. You just keep shining your magical unicorn light out there for all to see. I'll see you next time. Bye.